Thank you everyone to coming. We will start our post-launch section. So Dan the Rocha, founder and CEO of Fiddlesticks and Toxic Games, creator of a couple of great games. First person puzzle, yeah, am I correct? Yeah. Yes, great. He will tell us about franchising of your potential franchisee games. So Dan, please, thanks a lot for your presentations.
Yeah. So hey guys, I'm Dan de Rocha. I'm the director of Toxic Games and Fiddlesticks. I'm best known for creating the indie puzzle game Q.U.B.E, which came out on Steam in early 2012. For those of you who haven't heard of the game, I'm going to show you the quick original trailer for it. Looks like it's broken for some reason. Right, yeah. We'll continue. That's cool. Yeah. Okay, that was Q.U.B.E. I'm sure that looked good. Since then, I've done a bunch of other things, including Watermelon, Hue, Gravitation, and now working on Q.U.B.E 2. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about how you can turn your existing indie game into an indie franchise, essentially working on several sequels, and how you can build upon the foundations of your existing game and existing fan base. And if it's your first game, how you can sort of think about what's to come after launch. I found a lot of developers on their first game don't really think about that. They're all focused on the game at hand, especially when we were developing Q.U.B.E, we didn't really care about what was to come afterwards, as long as we sort of paid back that investment. And then after we launched, we sort of didn't know what to do. So yeah, Q.U.B.E began as a student project back in 2010. We created a short 5 to 10 minute demo with a small team of 3 guys. After speaking to a bunch of people, lecturers and so forth, and uploading the game to ModDB, we got lots of interest for the game, and then decided to turn it into a full-time thing, which we didn't think we could actually do. We didn't really know what indie was back then. So we approached Indie Fund, a small collective of game industry veterans, with the goal of helping newcomer developers get their game funded. So that enabled us to work on the game full-time for a year, which was great. We then released the game on Steam in early 2012 and paid back that money within 4 days, which enabled us to continue and do other things. But after that, we took a break. We were sort of burnt out from the intense crunching at the end of the project. So we didn't really know what to do after this. We all moved back to our hometowns, and we started making things up as we went along. There was no real plan. So we started looking at Q.U.B.E for mobile. We thought, mobile is sort of big right now. Let's create a different version of the game for that. So you can see this screenshot here on the right, which is the menu designed for Q.U.B.E Slide. But unfortunately, after we toyed around with different engines, and there was conflicts with the team, so we had to can the project in the end. But we might revisit it at some point. And then we looked at Q.U.B.E DLC. We thought, okay, we have an audience here. We haven't produced any new content, say 4 to 6 months after the game came out. We decided to produce some DLC, which was more of a speedrunner mode, sort of time trial based. And we released that on Steam, got front page exposure for a week. That was good, made some profit, but nothing life changing. And then Microsoft and Sony approached us and asked if we're bringing Q.U.B.E to consoles. And we thought, well, yeah, that sounds like a natural evolution for the game. Let's do that. We had no console experience at all, so we got a third-party porting company to do the work. Unfortunately, that company went bankrupt, which was a kick in the teeth. Halfway through development, we didn't expect that was going to happen at all. So we were kind of worried, what are we going to do next? And we were able to find another company that dug us out of that hole, but unfortunately it cost more money, and we were kind of not sure what was going to happen next. In the end, the game came out, I think it was last year, on all those consoles, Xbox One, PS4, PS3, and Wii U, and it paid back the investment that we put in, and it made some profit, which was good. And during that time, I actually set up a second studio called Mudvark. I took some profits that I made from Q.U.B.E and put it into that company. Took on another friend from university. And the whole reason I did this was to sort of explore other creative opportunities and make other games. And that's where Mortamelon and Hugh kind of came from. And that was quite refreshing to work on other stuff that wasn't Q.U.B.E related. And then it was quite nice to go back to Q.U.B.E. It was almost like getting the band back together. So during that time, Dave, the level designer of Q.U.B.E, started tinkering with Unreal Engine 4, which was new at the time. And we had special developer access before it went public. So I said to Dave, why don't you remake Q.U.B.E just to see what it looks like, and we can compare it to the original game. And he did, and it looks much better, of course, with the new lighting systems in there and so forth. And a year and a half later, he kept adding to that build, and we had about 4 hours of content, which I like to call sort of the glorious prototype. And yeah, then Q.U.B.E 2 was sort of born. But that brings me on to a point about sequels in general. Now, they're not always really done in the indie space. There's several reasons for this, but I think one of the key reasons is that a lot of developers spend years upon years working on that one game, and by the end, they're sort of burnt out, or they've got several other ideas that they want to pursue and just want to get onto that. If you told me I was going to work on Q.U.B.E 2 straight after Q.U.B.E 1 was done, I would have been like, no way, no, that's not happening at all. But now it's good to go back and have some time away from it. And as we all know, AAA games are churned out, every year. They have to, for these big publishers to sort of be in business. Huge amounts of money is on the line, so they've got to do that. And then in the indie space, I find the word sequel might be classed as a dirty word, sort of milking the cash cow in a way. But I think that it is sort of easier to generate revenue on a previous success. But I think there's many other reasons for pursuing the sequel direction, including the fan base. They want more content. On the forums, we get fans yearning for new puzzles and that sort of thing, and that's sort of underserved as we kind of generate new stuff. And I think it's definitely a safer bet. You can tap into that audience and see what they want, all their feedback, all their player feedback. And then going to investors and publishers, which is what we're doing at the moment. And we could self-fund, but the market sort of changed. I think it's becoming tougher in a way, sort of Steam greenlights and so forth. So yeah, going to publishers and investors with the sequel, you can say all the numbers, all the revenue that the original generated, and it's much more attractive to them. Now, building up that track record is probably the hardest part, but once you're there, it makes life a bit easier. And then building brand awareness, I think, is important. Unless you've built up your company brand, or if you're an individual and you've done all that stuff, I think it's harder to create a completely different game and bring that fan base with you. So if you've got the original game and you've done the sequel, then fans are going to know that name. And I think a lot of indie developers don't focus on the company at that time. They focus on the game and promotion of that one game. And this is another thing. When we shipped Q.U.B.E, there was a bunch of stuff we weren't happy with, and this gives us an opportunity to dive in and fix those problems and remove the stuff that didn't work so well. And the pipeline, we know the pipeline process, we know how to make the game, which makes it easier to come to a sequel, and we can actually focus on more important things like, game feel or narrative, or even new features and technologies, such as VR. We can actually create a really cool VR experience instead of shoehorning it into what we already have. I think that's very powerful. We can do cross-promotion. For example, in the first game, we can update the menu to say, look, Q.U.B.E 2 is coming. Did you like this one? And vice versa. If in Q.U.B.E 2, the menu, we can update that. We can fine-tune the marketing tactics. We can speak to press that enjoyed the game. We can say, hey, look, you gave us a cool review. We've got the sequel coming out. Do you want to check this out? And same with YouTubers and that sort of thing. So yeah, if we look at a few other games and other developers who've done similar things, you've got the Hello Game guys. They made Joe Danger 1, 2, and then they're now making No Man's Sky, which is a massive leap, but they couldn't have done that without building up that sort of company base, that fan base, and they're generating that revenue. Same with Clay, they did the Shank series, and now they did Don't Starve and a bunch of other games. You've got Coffee Stain, they made Sanctum 1, Sanctum 2. Actually, remember we were working on Q.U.B.E when they were working on that. And then they went ahead and did Goat Simulator, but that would have never happened if they didn't have that company culture where they could have done those game jams and then had the finances to take that from game jam to a full-blown thing. And then another developer, Sarah Northway, who created Rebuild 1 to 3. She did a talk at GDC and sort of talks about, she could have done one game over 4 years, but instead broke it down to 3 different games. The first one was a prototype thing, the second was mobile, and the third one was all the bells and whistles. And that's a really good way to build up that fan base early on, get that player feedback and reiterate. But had she just done one game, there wouldn't have been that feedback loop, and things might not have turned out the way they did. And yet all of these guys, building on the foundations of that existing fan base, I think that's very powerful. So yeah, post-launch is just the beginning, really. You've got to be prepared to support the game, all the bugs that come through, all the feedback from players. And I think it's important to plan for what's next before you launch the game, and know what to do after that. I always like to plan for the worst case scenario. So if the game doesn't generate as much revenue as we'd hoped, then we're not starving. So either get contract work lined up, or reserve funds, or even new funds for the next game, so that you're kind of safe in a way. And then if the game does take off and does do better than you'd hoped, then you can kind of cancel that contract or postpone the next game or whatever. I think that's playing it safe. DLC versus sequel. So at the end of development, I think of Q.U.B.E, we had a bunch of extra content. Now it's easy to think, okay, we might as well do some DLC. I think for the best execution of that, you need to have that planned out and know what's coming next. And but then the other question is, do you use that content and build a sequel? Long-term revenues will probably be better, but I think that's more of a personal choice as well if you want to invest another couple of years working on that same sort of IP. And the same thing, I go to my colleague Henry, we've got all this extra content, all these other ideas. I joke to him, what about Hue 2? And then he just gives me this evil stare. So yeah. Yeah, so here's a bunch of things to consider. I mean, there are a few ideas here. There's many other things you can do. But at least what we're doing is making use of new tech and features. For example, with Hue, we're integrating Razer Chroma support and Philips Hue support so that the keyboard changes color with the color of the background of the game. And from a marketing perspective, they'll hopefully talk about those elements because we're using their tech in new and innovative ways. Make the game more accessible, such as adding colorblind mode, which is what we're doing with Q.U.B.E 2. Q.U.B.E 1 didn't support that. And then there's a whole range of new players that will experience the game that could never do that before. Twitch is pretty big, if you can integrate that from the ground up. So there's a whole new audience there, a whole new set of players getting interested in your game. I think that's quite powerful. User-generated content, level sharing, that sort of thing, building a community around all that. I think that's definitely a good way to go, which we're actually doing with Q.U.B.E 2 as well. And then building from VR, from the ground up, I think is also good. Like with Q.U.B.E 1, we added support for that, but that was sort of more like shoehorning it into the existing experience. We're aiming to build a whole separate mode that's potentially on Rails that works really well with the technology. This is the standard thing, of course, with sequels, improving the visuals. Perhaps harder with a 2D game. I guess you can improve the art here and there, but with a 3D game, go to town on the lighting systems and that. Currently with Q.U.B.E 2, you need to wear sunglasses because it's so bright and shiny. Tune the game feel. I think, unless your game's super tight already, there's lots of stuff you can do. In Q.U.B.E 2, we're going to be improving the first-person platforming and that sort of thing. Discount the price of the original game up to launch of the sequel. I think that way you're sort of getting many more players in, ready for the next game. And then again, cross-promote, you can even bundle those games together and discount that. You know, if players were to buy them separately, it's cheaper to get them together. And then, yeah, break up the game into versions or episodes. I think early access is quite good for that sort of thing. That makes sense. And overall, you know, I think the important thing is to build up that brand and studio security. So build the first couple of games. You know, don't go for that super ambitious title that you really want to do first, perhaps, or at least water it down to its key mechanics and simplify it, because that's what we did with Q.U.B.E. You know, none of us were programmers, we were all designers, and we tried to get a coder on, but we at the time, during university, we had no cash, so we couldn't afford to do that. So play to your strengths, and you know, we made the entire game without touching a line of code, essentially, and we simplified everything as much as possible. So with round 2, with Q.U.B.E. 2, you know, we can actually get a coder on board and do some much more advanced things now that we have that initial fan base and that initial studio security. So I think that's really good. But yeah, that was it really. Much quicker than expected. And you can follow me on Twitter at @DanDeRocha, or send me an email, and check out Q.U.B.E. at QubeGame.com. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Okay.
We're taking
question.
Questions. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I want to ask, what do you think, what games, what genres are good for sequels, and what maybe are not the best idea to make a sequel? Or should you make a DLC or another game with the same genre?
Yeah, I think it's tough, really. If the game's got a strong narrative that you can kind of continue, then I think it's worth pursuing. There are some games that, I guess with a 2D game, it might be challenging to do that, because when people see the game for the first time, that's what they want to see, is like there's a visual improvement that kind of lures them in. So yeah, I'm not sure what specific genres might not be good, but definitely first-person games, I think, are a good way to go.
Okay, I got one more question.
Sure.
You say about franchise. Maybe I connect to previous asker. Yeah, maybe you have a prognosis to create in the same settings, not settings, the same person. Do you have personages or NPCs or special setting of your game?
Yes,
I mean,
there's a voiceover narrative that's kind of...
I mean, like guys from... oh my God, I forgot about... Clash of Clans, кто делал, Supercell, точно. Like guys from Supercell, yes, they create different types of the worlds, just using their personages to create different types of games or genres. Yeah, the same universe,
okay.
The same, yeah.
Yeah, no, that definitely, that's what we were doing with Q.U.B.E. Slide, the mobile version, which was a completely different game, but it uses the same sort of, the red block, blue block sort of thing, but in a whole new way with sort of new characters. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good thing to do as well.
Great.
Would you make a third game? Q.U.B.E. 3?
Let's call our jets there. We'll see what happens.
Oh, yeah. And one more question. As I know, installed base of the guys who is playing in the first version of the game, I think the 30 or 50% will go to another. What do you think about this? It will be much more guys who will start to play at the Q.U.B.E. 2 who had been playing in the Q.U.B.E. just Q.U.B.E. or...
How many people would transfer to the next one?
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard to say. I think that sort of hardcore fan base on Steam, for example, will translate across, but I think we have to do more.
So what about % of fan base who will transfer to Q.U.B.E. 2? What do you think? What amount of % of fan base of Q.U.B.E. will transfer to Q.U.B.E. 2?
Numbers-wise, I'm not entirely sure, but hopefully a good amount.
100%.
100%.
Okay, thank you. One more question.
So Dan, you told that in the beginning your team was mostly the designers, right? And you tried to save some money on the developers. So what's about the promotion? What's about the marketing part? Did you spend anything on that? What channel of communication did you use?
Yeah, so a lot of the marketing stuff was going to shows like this and promoting the game, like GDC, PAX Prime, that sort of thing, and building up a network of journalists and YouTubers, and using our contacts to do that sort of thing. I mean, it's quite costly. I'm not sure how much we would have spent, but all things considered, we did everything on the cheap because we had a limited amount of funds, and I think we managed to pull it off. Cheers.
So, any more? Okay, that's it. Then
Cool.
thanks
Thanks,
a lot.
guys. Thanks for watching.
Thanks. We'll stay here. Yeah, all day. Or whole day today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can
Yeah,
ask
if you wanna
then
go out.
everything.